Hi, and welcome to part two. In this one, we're going to take a look at clothing this naked man. So I'm going to go ahead and hide the bones because we don't really need that right now, and jump into viewport shading. And under the clothing tab here, you're going to see we have some options. These are limited. Admittedly, you can create clothes from scratch, but these are going to be a lot easier to work with in most situations. And for this character, I'm going to select Frosty Evening. And the reason I'm selecting Frosty Evening is this jacket is very close to what I think the final result of a robe should be, hood included. So before we were talking about making the body proportions a little bit smaller to work better with clothes. This is why. With the hips especially, things tend to get bulged out a little bit on HumanGen, so it's easier to just kind of keep everything in. That being said, because this is a character with a single garment of clothing, we're actually not going to use any of the built-in shape key body proportion stuff. From this point out, we're going to be 100% focused on a simulation-based solution. So first things first, I'm going to select the shirt underneath, delete that, the pants, delete that. I'm going to select our human. I'm going to go in, and all these masks here, I'm going to delete, just like that. So as you can see, we got some clipping issues, but that won't be an issue when we're done. I'm going to go ahead and select the clothing that we have left over, and under the object data properties, I am going to go all the way down on shape keys, and I'm going to delete everything that isn't the bases. So once we get to the bases, this is what we'll have. So basically, the main solution here is to turn this into a cloth sim, which is really easy. We can just go in a cloth sim, and if you hit play, you'll notice that the cloth simply falls because the only force acting on it right now is gravity. So to change that, I'm going to turn off all of the particles on our dude. I'm going to select our guy and make sure that he is a collision object. But we don't want to run the simulation yet. There's still some work that has to get done. So under soft body and cloth, on the collision object, or the collision properties, I want to make the outer thickness 0.001. And then I'm going to select the cloth, and under the collision properties down here, I'm going to make sure that the distance is also set to 0.001. So after playing around with the settings, we got some decent collisions. The biggest thing is just bumping up quality steps and making sure that things aren't moving too fast. If you have interpolation data between frame 1 and 2 where this is moving between collision objects, then the collision calculations can be thrown off. So I'm going to turn on self collisions and bring that distance down to 0.001 and rerun the simulation. This does increase simulation times quite a bit, but everything will look a lot more natural. So when you're rerunning the sim with the outline on, you can kind of see what your distances are. And this is dictated by this number here, the thickness outer of the collision object. And then you can play with that to kind of dial in how you want things to look. So I'm starting to get results that are a little bit more in line with what I'd expect. I'm going to turn friction up quite a bit, probably to 15. And what that does is when the fabric hits the shoulders or the arms, it's less likely to slide down. You're going to see that a lot right here. The fabric is less likely. See, it's sticking a little bit better. All right, so next thing's next. Because we deleted all that information here, we can actually sculpt this garment. a little bit. So if we go to, I like doing this in material preview because I just get a slightly better idea of how things are running. One thing I do want to take care of is I want to separate the hood a little bit from the jacket. It's a place where right now things are playing nice, but this is likely to be a problem further on down the line with how close this is down here. So I'm going to jump into sculpt mode with the smooth brush, and I'm going to bring the strength way down and just ease up that just a little bit so that we can get just a little bit more separation there. Nothing too crazy. You don't want to go overboard with this at all. This is also a great tool to relax some of these edges that are a little sharp, in my opinion. We're also going to be retexturing this entirely, so I'm not too worried about the that look of it right now. I'm also going to go in with a fairly strong smooth brush, and I'm going to just smooth everything down quite a bit. I want this to be a little bit more form-fitting. And the smooth brush is a really good way to get a lot of work done really quickly. Yeah. All right, that's pretty close, I think. So down here we can use the grab brush and just kind of nudge things away from the skin a little bit. So using the grab tool, we can sort of move things away from intersecting with the model. We want everything to be separated. At this point, I think I'm going to turn symmetry on and select the inflate brush and just give a little bit more volume to the sleeves, just so they're a little bit more robe-like. I'm going to turn the strength down, and then if you hold shift, you can smooth. And that just gives a little bit of volume there. I'm going to go back over to the grab brush, make sure that this isn't intersecting. I'm going to turn symmetry off. Good. And then now I think is the time to make the robe actually the right length. So we're going to jump over to edit mode. We're going to go down here and alt select that loop, and then I'm just going to drag it down just like that. And that is essentially all you really need to do. If you hit Control R, you can add edge loops, and I'm just going to add enough edge loops to sort of match the spacing between our new loops and the old ones. And that way, when you simulate, everything has kind of the same level of detail. Right now, it's really stretched out, obviously, because we have the default material on. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. So we're just working with this, and boom, just like that. This is what we're working with. I think I'm going to go and change this from silk to denim. Denim's got a little bit more rigidity. It's got a little bit less flex to it. It looks like an older garment because things fold a little bit less. This is something that he's probably worn for years at this point. So one thing that I like to do at this stage is I like to set up a force field, and in this case, wind. So I'm going to rotate this on the x-axis. I'm going to bring this over, rotate it on the z-axis a little bit, just move it over here, and I'm going to increase the strength to 20,000. And then I'm going to rerun the sim. As you can see, the wind is affecting the garment, and that's giving us a little bit more interaction. So this does take time to dial in, but it's well worth it. So now's the time for editing. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to select these loops here. I'm going to select these loops here. I'm going to select individual origins, and I'm just going to increase this sleeve a little bit more, just like that. And that's going to look a little weird, but if we jump into sculpt mode and we have the smooth brush, we can bring it down really, really tight with symmetry turned on. And we can just start to even those out a little bit. Just like that. I'm going to go down to the grab brush and fix this intersection right here. I can turn off symmetry at this point. And then I'm going to go back into edit mode and I'm going to hit 1. And that's going to bring up vertex view. And now I'm going to start stitching this down so that he's not, you know, essentially flashing. So with this button up here, this is auto merge vertices. If you select that, you can select 2 vertices that are opposite each other. In this case, we're going to pick these ones and make sure that we have a median point selected between the 2. If we had individual points and I hit scale on the X with proportional editing off, nothing happens because it's using the points of the vertices as their own origin point. If you select median point and you hit scale on the X, they will come together. And if you bring them close together, they will auto merge into one. So this is how we're going to stitch these together. Scale on the X, bring them close together, and they merge into one. So we've successfully clothed this man. I think one thing that we want to do is add some edge loops here, just to give a little bit more definition. And then we want to try something that we definitely want to be careful with. I'm going to go into sculpt mode with the smooth brush, turn that down, and I want to just relax these points just a little. But what you can see here, if you jump back in edit mode, is it creates some weirdness. So you can offset that by selecting that vertex there, hitting double G, and then slide it back up. I think that sort of relaxes it as well. And I'm just going to do the same right there. So now I'm going to go ahead and run the simulation again, just to make sure that everything is behaving as expected. So this character is just a simple guy hiding out in a cave protecting an ancient force relic. So got a little bit of a simple life, got simple clothes, simple needs, and yeah, that's pretty much all this guy's about. So I'm gonna select him and I'm going to append something I've already made. So I'm going to append something from a character I've already made. This is material here, and I'm just going to bring in robes. And then I'm going to select that. So robes is a fabric texture that I made. It's a little hard to see. After the cloth on the robes themselves, after the cloth simulation, I'm going to add a subdivision with right now just one level, just so that I can get a slightly better look at how things are working. So by plugging this into the color, you can see that it's kind of this woven texture. So right now it's using the UV map, which is not great. So I'm going to go into edit mode, hit 3 so that we're in face select all the faces. Actually, the first thing I'm going to do is hit 2 and select all those. And I'm going to go to edge and clear seam, mesh, edge, and clear sharp. So we want to create our own UV map. So what we're going to do is we are going to turn off subdivision for now. And I'm just going to start selecting where the seams would be in real life if this was an actual stitched garment. So once you have your seam selected, you can hit U and mark seam, just like that. So in this case, that would be a seam. I think this would be a seam. I think you'd have seams running down the arms, but I think the arms would be stitched on themselves. So we'll select that loop there as a seam and this loop here. You mark as seam. I'm going to select this loop just to get an idea of where it starts. And I'm going to select this and this. I'm going to hit U, mark as seam. So that's just a little marker so I know where things start. I'll select this, and then with Control, you can just follow this line down. And if you hold the Control and click, it will select the least amount of space between, or the fastest route from start to finish. Mark seam. I'm going to do the same one for here. U, mark seam. I'm going to select the end of the sleeves. U, mark seam. Bottom here, U, mark seam. That one there. U, mark seam. And then I'm going to go underneath, and this middle line here, I think. Now, it probably doesn't have to be that complicated, but okay, we'll hit 3 for now. We'll hit A to select everything. I'm going to open up a new window, bring down the UV editor. I'm going to hit U, and I'm going to click unwrap, and there we go. Got hood, main body, sleeves. Works for what we need it to. We'll jump out of that, as you can see, because we were in the middle of the timeline there. It is calculating the simulation from a weird point. So if we just go back to 0, then we'll be fine. So this fabric texture is made in a really interesting way. So first things first, we're using a noise texture that is going into a color ramp, just kind of just so that we have some control over things. And I'll show you what that does, because that's being plugged into a brick texture, and that noise texture being fed through a color ramp and being mixed with a mapping node is being fed into the vector, and that is breaking up the edge of the brick, the edges of the brick texture to kind of give this woven look. And then that is going into another color ramp that is being plugged into a bump map, which is giving us height information, just like that. So I'm going to jump over to this view, to rendered view. I'm going to bring up another color ramp and plug the color that's going into the base color there. So then I can make the lightest color brown, and I'm going to make the darkest color also a brown, but nearly black. So that way we get that kind of look where the wear and tear is kind of recessed into the stitching area. So I think something else I'm going to do is add in a mix RGB and another noise texture, and I'm going to feed that through a color ramp. So bring the color there. This way will multiply, and then I'm just going to if you have node wrangler selected and you hit Control Shift and you click on a node, you can see only that node's output, which is very handy. So here I'm going to add some detail. I'm going to increase the roughness. I'm going to bring the scale up a bit. I'm going to add a 4D W slider, and all that does is that just gives me a random seed that I can use to determine where I want that. So this is just wear and tear. So feeding through the multiply node here, you can see how that is adding a lot of extra detail to everything. So might want to bring the scale. You don't want things to be too uniform, but you also don't want them to look too placed. So in this case, this is probably the right way to go. noticing a little bit of stretching back here, and I'm wondering if it is worth it to split the hood into separate UV islands at this point. I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. So an easy way to do that, you can select the middle seam, and that's the seam that bisects the entire thing. And then all you have to do is select the seam's starting point and just work your way backwards. But it's easy enough to select that so you know which one is actually in the center, because as you can see, it's offset here. So I'm going to go ahead and mark seam, hit 3 again, A, and unwrap. So now we have two sections of the hood, and that should ease up that stretching a little bit and add a seam, which is nice. So another thing you can do is you can go in, and for every seam, let's select this seam for example, you can hit Control B, and that is the bevel. And if you scroll up, you'll notice that you get different cuts in the mesh. So bring this up just a little bit, scroll up once to get an inner seam, and then you can select that inner seam going all the way down, and you can just bring it back a little bit in editing. So once you bring that back and you jump back out, you'll notice that now you have an actual seam built in to your cloth. So if we turn subdivision back on and run the simulation, you can see that seam kind of sticks to itself. It kind of stays prominent. And that's something that I like to do for most seams. So for this model especially, I am going to want to select the arms, Control B, bevel them out just a little bit, go back, select 2, make sure you have the inner selected, make sure that you have individual origins selected as well, and then now you can just scale them down just a touch. Just like that, you get some seams. So this is a much easier method than a lot of the things that I see out there. And this isn't to shortcut the correct way of doing things. This is to make an efficient mesh that you can work with that still looks good, because there's no point in going overboard in how this kind of thing is made. You know, this is for a YouTube video after all, it's not for a motion picture. If you're getting paid to do this and you have a tight deadline, then knowing tricks like this can be extremely helpful. So I'm just going to go ahead and add some more seams. So in this case, it is worth noting that is adding polygons. For a mesh like this, it's not a huge deal. But the more complicated the mesh, obviously, the every single polygon that you can save is an increase on your efficiency, on the time that you can get things done. So that is worth keeping in mind. So for this, I'm going to add 0.001 of subsurface scattering. You might be wondering why I'm doing that. I'm also going to turn subsurface scattering on for the skin, which I don't think I did actually. So at this point, if you forgot to add subsurface scattering as I did to the mesh, it is worth noting that the subsurface scattering default for HumanGen is 0.15. And for anyone wondering what subsurface scattering does, I will show you a little demonstration. So subsurface scattering is the light entering the skin and diffusing along the edges. It's a really good way to get a lot of realism, because that's the way skin actually works. So you can see that adds a lot of extra detail, like right off the bat. So another thing I'm going to do is after the collision modifier here, I'm going to go ahead and add subdivision surface as well to the mesh. And what that does, you'll be able to see it a lot clearer up here. Can you see these lines right here? So these are these are artifacts caused by subsurface scattering. See, if I turn subsurface scattering, see that's completely gone. And the way that the mesh detail is calculated. So if you add subdivision surface with 1 level and turn that on, that adds enough detail to minimize that. In most cases, for rendering at least, I am going to increase that the subdivision surface detail to 2, and that completely gets rid of it. And in my case, also, in my opinion, also softens up a lot of the harsher edges that are created by the polygon mesh. So another thing that I set up here just to test is actually adding the fabric weave bump map through a displacement. So the way that you set that up is having the model selected. You're going to want to switch over into experimental mode under feature set here in your render settings. Then go down and in the subdivision information here, there's going to be different dicing rates, and that's going to have to do with what the resolution of your displacement is depending on your camera's distance from the object. So for the viewport, default is 8, and for render, default is 1. 1 for this situation, probably a little high. I'm actually going to bring the dicing rate for the viewport down to 4 and just see how that kind of behaves. Yeah, that works. So I'm going to actually change the render settings to 4 as well. And then in your actual modifier stack, you want subdivision, and you want to select this button right here, adaptive subdivision. Click that, and your dicing rate should be 1 by default. I just put mine to 0.8 just to bring the detail in a little bit more. And as you can see, what that is doing is actually deforming the mesh based on that weave. So that's something that you might want to try. I think I'm going to leave that in for the final render because I think that will make things look, well, it certainly will make things look more realistic. So, but one thing I am noticing is that it's kind of looking like pajamas, the way things are right now. That could be a result of this kind of coming down to like low ride, like an inseam or something. One thing that you could do is split the back open so that you had that flowing through, but I think the solution that I'm going to take is I'm going to go on frame 0, select this, jump on over to sculpt mode. If you're wondering what I just pressed to bring up this pie menu, it's Control Tab. Going into mode here, and I'm just going to smooth where his hips are. And you want to be careful not to smooth over the seams because you'll see that completely gets rid of them. So you want to be careful there. So I just want to bring in that waist seam a little bit so that things are just a little bit closer to the body, you know, because I don't want this to look like Scrooge's nightie in Christmas Carol. You know what I mean? I'm going to jump into edit mode, and I'm going to select this seam right here, which is the waist. And before I start scaling anything down, I'm going to make sure that merge vertices is off. If I don't do that and I start scaling things down with proportional editing, you're going to start seeing some things disappear. We're going to likely lose this vertice here, which is going to kill the seam in the center, and that's not what we want. So I'm going to bring that in. I'm going to bring this in just a little bit. I'm going to bring this in a little bit, just kind of fit this a little bit better. Jump back into sculpt mode with the grab brush. Pull things out. Make sure you're not in symmetry mode. And just sort of even things out a little bit. I'm going to bring things in on the hips here because there's no point in having them be that wild. Bring things in. At any point you can hit shift and smooth out as well, but you want to be careful about not going over those seams. So you can smooth those out. Things start to peek through. Pull them back just like that. Really good there. So I'm going to jump back into object mode, and I'm just going to run the sim. And that is giving a little bit more definition and shape. That's exactly what I was looking for. Perfect. Perfect. And with the wind blowing, things are looking pretty good. So I'm going to quickly here run a 60 frame cache. And that's just going to commit the simulation to memory. You can delete that at any time, work on it after the fact, but this is going to be able to play back in near real time. So, all right, so now that we have the simulation baked, I can hit play, and we can get a better idea of how things are behaving. You want a little bit more frames, you can go in here, turn subdivision off. Look at that, playing at near real time. Let's see what our, yeah. Perfect, sits on the body good, it's got a good amount of stretch. Yeah, that's working well. So, one thing you want to keep in mind is that you want time for your simulation to settle before you start animating. And that's something that we're going to cover in part 3. So thanks for joining me, and I'll see you guys next time.